Well, as you remember last week we were talking about the Wizard of Oz and how this is a mythic story. And it's not only a mythic story, it is a story that is your story and my story. All of us are working together in creating a mythic life for ourselves. Last week we heard about the Tin Man and how he wanted a heart. And yet we saw how he moved through that time and began to show that he was creating a heart within himself. And this week we're talking about the Scarecrow and the Cowardly Lion. You know, when we make this journey, we are among friends. All of us here are working on the same things. We're all working towards that coming home feeling of being who we truly are, of really manifesting a new mythical life within ourselves and in our community and in our world. And so this morning we're going to talk some more about the Wizard of Oz and how it relates to our life. This isn't just a story. It means so much more than we ever dreamed it could be. And so, you know, here we are together, and that yellow brick road of trials along the journey take our characters deep within themselves, just like our trials take us deep within ourselves. And so we find the resources to move down the path toward Oz, toward who we truly are, toward home, that place within us where we know we belong, that place that is spirit. And this new world is filled with danger when we go to Oz, and it's sometimes things that we don't want. And as we walk along, we find that things happen. Perhaps what it is that we know that we can't go on the way things are, and that we need to change, and we need to bring new things into our life. Or perhaps we have an accident or an illness that throws us into a new way of being, a new way of seeing things, a new way of acting in the world. Or perhaps we're getting married or we've gotten a divorce. All of these things throw us into that mythic life along the way as we move towards being that person that we really long to be and have all of those attributes that we really desire. And so, with all of our companions with us, we walk the yellow brick road. And our friends, as they are walking along, the lion tells them that they must hurry now through this stretch and through this region where they are, because there are some enormous, ferocious beasts that live in this area. So we have to get through in a hurry. And so Dorothy asks what they look like, and the lion replies,
"They're monstrous beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers and claws so long and so sharp. They could slice me in two as easily as I could kill Toto. I'm terribly afraid of the Caladeans."
"I'm not surprised that you are. They must be dreadful beings." The lion was about to reply when suddenly they came upon another gulf across the road. But this one was so broad and deep that the lion knew at once that he could not leap across it. And so they sat down to consider what they would do. After serious thought, the Scarecrow said,
"Well, here is a great tree standing close to the ditch. If the Tin Woodman can chop it down so that it will fall to the other side, we could then easily walk across it."
Well, that's a first-rate idea. One would almost think that you have brains in your head instead of straw.
Oh,
The woodman set to work at once, and so sharp was his axe that the tree was soon chopped nearly through. And then the lion put his strong front legs against the tree and pushed with all of his might. And slowly the big tree tipped and fell with a crash across the ditch, and with its top branches on the other side. They had just started across the strange bridge when a sharp growl made them all look up. And to their horror, they saw running toward them two great beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers.
They're the Chaldeans!
Quick, let's cross over.
So Dorothy went first, holding Toto in her arms, and the Tin Woodman followed, and the Scarecrow came next. And the lion, though he was certainly afraid, turned to face the Chaldeans, and then he gave so loud and terrible a roar that Dorothy screamed, and the Scarecrow fell over backwards, while even the fierce beast stopped short and looked at him in surprise. But seeing that they were bigger than the lion, and remembering that there was two of them and only one of him, the Chaldeans again rushed forward, and the lion crossed over the tree and turned to see what they would do next. Without stopping an instant, the fierce beasts also began to cross the tree, and the lion said to Dorothy,
We are lost, for surely they will tear us to pieces with their sharp claws. But stand close behind me. As long as I am alive, I will fight them.
Now just wait a minute. I've been thinking about this and what is best to be done. Woodman, chop down the tree and take the end off.
The Tin Woodman began to use his axe at once and chopped away the tree that rested on their side of the ditch. And just as the two Chaldeans were nearly across, the tree fell with a crash down, down, down into the gulf, carrying the ugly, snarling brutes with it, and both were dashed to pieces on the sharp rocks below.
Well, it looks like we will be alive for a little bit longer. And I am glad for it. Must be a terrible thing not to be alive.
That's right.
Those creatures, they frightened me so badly that my heart beats yet.
Well, it certainly is good to be alive while we're living. Thank you. We are so fortunate to have so much talent in this congregation. So if you were noticing what was happening here, we have two characters who are actually in transformation right before our eyes. Right before our eyes, they are changing, and they are doing things that we never expected them to do. The lion, even though he's terrified, has decided to step in front of his friends and fight to the death in order to save them. And, you know, it's easy to be courageous if you're not afraid. But if you are afraid, it is a very big thing to do, to stand in front and be willing to fight to the death. For the Scarecrow, or any of us, transformation of consciousness requires more than a change of attitude. It requires looking within. There are many research projects out there right now that go way beyond anything they knew in 1900 when this story was written. But J. Frank Braun was very ahead of his time. In fact, he was so ahead of his time that in some of the stories that he wrote, he talked about the cell phone and the computer. And so we see that he has this imagination that goes way beyond what we know, but he is writing about something that we are only now beginning to understand. And so he's writing about projects that take place that are teaching us that our brains are so much more versatile than we ever thought they were. And Jean Houston, who wrote The Wizard of Us, says this, that the scarecrow requires, and what is accomplished as the story unfolds is something more. It's a transformation of awareness. Each of us have the scarecrow within us. Each of us think that, our brains are not functioning as well as we would like them to sometimes. And so there are some steps that we see the scarecrow taking that are very significant in his adventure in growing his brain. And it all begins when Dorothy finds him in a field, and he's up on a stick, and he is supposedly scaring away crows, but he doesn't think he's doing a very good job, and he believes that that there's got to be more. There's got to be more to life, and he wants to change. He wants some brains, and so the first thing that happens is that Dorothy engages him with questions. And as she asks the questions, it starts his brain to begin to develop a little bit. And as we move on, he asks her, he's found an ally, someone who can help him. He's found a friend. And so he asks her if she would take him down from his stick that's stuck up his back. And she does. And when she does, he falls to the ground. And this is very significant because this is the time when the scarecrow is getting used to the fact that perhaps there's more to him than he thought. There's a lot more than he thinks he can do. And so he lies there for a little bit. And the scarecrow had realized and acknowledged that he was stuck. He was stuck where he was. He was not going to be going anyplace without some help from someone else. And so that's when he asked Dorothy, after she had asked him questions, if she would take him down. And while he was on the ground, he imagines that his condition might be helped and that he might be able to create a brain. And if he asks for assistance, he is sure that something is going to really begin to happen. And there are two things that have to happen in order for him to move forward. And one of them is he develops his imagination. But there's something else that he needs to do, and that is to develop his motor skills. And so what he does is he gets up and he starts to dance. And he's cavorting, and he's talking about the new possibilities there are for him, and he begins to sing those possibilities about all of the things that he can do. He is so excited. And so here he is, he's laughing, he's singing, and he's really making that next step in becoming unstuck. And notice that as he is there, and as he was probably thinking about all kinds of things, perhaps when he was standing looking at the sun and the moon and the country all around him, he spent a lot of time, and perhaps he spent that contemplating. And so there's contemplation that's going on. For the scarecrow, or any of us, transformation of consciousness requires more. It requires that we take time to go within. There's something very, very interesting about this whole transformation experience, because we can change the whole world around us when we make changes within ourselves. You know, there's been a study about neuroplasticity, and they have all of these machines now that can actually figure out what it is that our brain is doing and what, you know, the areas that it's thinking. And they've also found out that if we injure one part of our brain, another part of our brain that is in no way connected with that part can actually adapt and take over the function of the injured part. There is so much work done right now in the development of the brain and seeing how it can change. So very simply, neuro is the nerve cells in our brains and the nervous system, and plasticity is for the changeable, malleable, modifiable aspects of the brain. So no matter what kind of grooves we've gotten into, it may take some time, but we can get out of those grooves. We do not have to stay stuck in those places in our life. And the scarecrow realizes this. And so he gets himself interested in how it is that perhaps he can grow his brain. And so he begins to think about all of the things he would like to do. He's using his imagination. He can make puzzles. He can solve puzzles. He just thinks of all of the things that he can do. He can write. He can do all kinds of wonderful things. And so he contemplates that, and he thinks, you know, I can just while away the hours talking to the flowers. You know, there's just so many things I can do now. And so he begins to build his brain. And the cowardly lion also has to change as well. And so with his companions, he begins to change and to begin to step out and take care of others and be willing to help them. In an earlier episode, they come across another chasm, which is not as wide. And what happens there is the lion jumps across with one of them on their back and then jumps back and then goes back. But first he jumps by himself to make sure that he can make it. And so in small steps, he is becoming more and more courageous. So he too is building within his brain a confidence that there is more to him than he thought. And so with all of the things we know about building our brains, building our courage, building our heart, we know that we will eventually be able to go home. We know that we'll eventually be able to continue our hero's journey. And so as we do, each time they come across a problem that's even more frightening than the last, they have built up a confidence that they together can get through it. And so they continue on. They don't lay down and say, oh my gosh, we're lost. There's nothing we can do. We'll let those monsters eat us. And later on, like next week, we're going to talk about that witch we mentioned last week and those horrible monkeys. So each challenge becomes a little more difficult. But each challenge becomes more reasonably achieved. They have resources now that they can call upon between the four of them, or the five of them, counting Toto, who guides the way, and he represents the life force. And so as they are running and skipping and getting caught in poppy fields and falling asleep and all of the things that happen to them, there's someone that comes up with an idea of what they can do to manage to get out of it. And so they're going through transformation. And when we go through transformation, we usually go back to our life with renewed energy. You know, when we go through a transformation, often we go through many. We're not just going through one, folks. There are many transformations we go through in our lives. And those transformations all make us stronger if we continue the journey. If we carry on with the strength that is within us. And so, through this transformation, when we get through one, what we find is that we have a renewed energy and perhaps a new direction. And Jean Houston calls it greening. She calls it greening. And Dorothy takes what she learned in Oz back to Kansas. And she begins to see things differently. She begins to act differently. She begins to truly appreciate. And so this is what happens to us too. We may not be really, really different. We may not change in great, enormous ways. But we realize that there's something different about us and that we see things in a new way, in a totally new way. And when we too bring back our new consciousness to appreciate, we'll appreciate more. We will love more. We will make changes for the better in our families and with our friends and in our neighborhoods and in our world. You know, now is the time. Now is the time when we are in a point where we can annihilate our entire species. And if we do not change, I don't know what will happen. We must change. We must come into that. We must find our brains. We must find our hearts. We must grow them so that we have deeper understanding, so that we have bigger hearts, so that we have more courage to stand up for what we believe in. And so as we take this journey, that is where we are headed. We are headed down this wonderful yellow brick road that's going to take us to a new place. And we are being called to participate in our own hero's journey in order to experience a vastly bigger life. Otherwise, there is a strong possibility that we will not survive. So we are called to cosmic consciousness. We are called to cosmic connections. To be the cosmic beings in a living universe that we actually are. We are this universe. And it is time to take that call. To grow in our thinking and living. And to actually bring into our scope this extraordinary journey that is taking us home to ourselves, to a new awakening. For this is our journey home. God bless you on this journey.